and coming background, I had to start pursuing trying to figure out how these things were made, and that includes being in Egypt and Lebanon and Jordan and many other locations.
Wow. The fascinating thing that we were discussing here, my name is Ozias, by the way, and the school is Saints of Christ Academy. And it's funny because what we've been trying to do in different schools of thought is try to take it up a notch in regards to how these ancient sites are viewed.
Right.
So we've been communicating and to different, scholars and people who are going to these different sites. And what's great about it is your name comes up all the time as the Indiana Jones of archaeology and going to these sites. So I'm very glad to have you on.
Well, thank you.
So the discussion around the table now, I got maybe 3 questions, but the discussion around the table is our school of thought as well is that the ancient Egyptians, when you look at these megalithic sites, did not have the technology or the capability to produce those type of cuts on the stones.
Well, actually, in some cases, we don't have the technology now to do some of the work. That's what makes it even more incredible. There are these boxes located at a site called the Serapeum, and they weigh 100 tons apiece. Each one was made from a single block. So the box itself weighs 70 tons, the lid weighs 30 tons, and stone manufacturers have been sent photographs and have been asked if they could make them. And in all cases, they say it's not possible out of one piece of stone.
Wow. The typical thing that Egyptologists teach, I know within our communities and even other communities around the world, they teach that those things were built by those dynasties. And I watched one of your videos in regards to the dynasty, and when you made a reference that those type of stones could not have come from any of those dynasties.
No, it's technically impossible for them to have done it. It doesn't matter how many thousands or millions of workers they had. The basic idea is that the Great Pyramid, for example, was built over the course of 20 years, and it's made up of 2,300,000 blocks, each one being multi-ton. And so that means that each stone would have to be cut, moved, and set into place every 2 minutes. That's clearly not possible.
Wow. I was just doing a little bit of my homework in regards to Pumapunku and in your work that was there. And I noticed on some of the stones, they were like keyhole cuts, like cuts on the stones, specifically like keyhole cuts.
Yeah, they're actually called keystone cuts, and that's where a bronze clamp would be poured, like molten bronze would be poured to hold 2 stones together. But the amazing thing about Pumapunku is the surfaces are almost laser flat. So that would, we've had engineers with us in Pumapunku, and that they can't figure out what kind of tools we have that could produce something like Pumapunku.
Wow. So my thoughts as well within that, because have you seen that in Egypt, like the keystone cuts?
Yeah.
From your observation in these different sites, does it appear that it's some type of global architecture that was going on with all the sites that you have been at?
I think there were at least 3 ancient cultures involved because the approach is very different. In Egypt, you have the monumental work, and it's very, all the surfaces are linear and flat. But in the highlands of Peru, you find polygonal construction where every stone is a different shape and size, and they're almost like marshmallows being squished together. And then also at Pumapunku, there is no site similar to Pumapunku on the planet. It seems that whoever built it only built that, and that was it. So I think there were 3 or possibly even more very advanced civilizations involved.
Wow. So I noticed I was watching some of your work that you did in Tanis.
Mm-hmm.
And in Tanis, you mentioned that even the sand I'm not sure if it's just in Tanis, but that the sand had a different type of texture to it.
Yeah, the interesting thing about Tanis is that it's located in the Nile Delta. That's where most of Egypt's food is produced. So you drive into the Nile Delta for between 2 and 2.5 hours through, incredible agriculture. Then you reach Tanis, which is this hill, and the soil is the consistency of flour. It's like walking on the moon, as if a massive heat struck the site. Also, a lot of the stone is melted, and that requires at least 2,000 degrees Celsius to do.
So by your observation, just in Tanis alone and in other spots, it seems to be some type of immediate halt on working on these stones.
Yeah, you find that throughout Egypt. Like the unfinished obelisk that would have weighed 1,200 tons was never completed. Also at Baalbek in Lebanon, you have a 1,200-ton stone, and another one they just found, which is 1,600 tons. It's as if work suddenly stopped at all these locations, possibly all at the same time. I'm not sure yet, but in Peru as well. You also see catastrophic damage, not damage done by invading people, but by some incredible forces like earthquakes of 9 or 9.5 on the Richter scale, heat scorching, and the walls pulled apart also by massive earthquakes.
Wow. In the scope of things, because I keep going back to the contemporary things that we were taught. I was taught the same thing in school and in college by some professors that's it was in that field, that even the rock layers of the ancient Egyptians are different. The way that they were building on top of these structures it's different. Would that be true?
Yeah, that is true. It's amazing the distances that were from the quarry to the actual site. For example, they recently did analysis by geologists of the limestone of the Giza Plateau, and they found 3 different kinds, and none of that limestone is located near the Giza Plateau. It's all across the Nile River in Cairo. And even more spectacular is the granite that's found, because almost all of the granite comes from Aswan, which is at the southern end of Egypt. So on the Giza Plateau, you had 80-ton granite blocks. At the Osirion, you have 40 to 50-ton granite blocks moved hundreds of miles. And there's no way that the Egyptians had the capability of building giant barges in order to move the stone down the Nile, because there are no useful and never were useful trees in Egypt. You have date palms, but you can't build ships out of them. So they keep throwing that idea out that they built these giant barges, but where would the wood have come from?
Wow. I mean, and that was one leading up to one of my biggest questions, is because as other schools of thought out there that the Egyptians used sand and water to drag these stones hundreds of miles.
No. Actually, the latest one is that they poured milk in front of the stone to act as a lubricant.
Oh my gosh. It's almost, and I think this is the work that you guys are doing is great, because it's destroying the contemporary ideology that has been fed to the masses about these locations. It's almost appearing as if something's being purposely hidden in regards to this technology that the ancients, built on top of.
Yeah, exactly. If you have a megalithic site and then you have construction on top, the work on top is always inferior to what's below it. Like, it's night and day. So we understand, like at sites like Machu Picchu, for example, the 5 to 10% inner core is megalithic. And it's obvious that the Inca found Machu Picchu in a state of ruin and they rebuilt it because you have inferior stone workmanship right on top of it. So it's really obvious that way.
Oh, wow. I had a discussion via Facebook, and I wanted to kind of like just bring that discussion up. And it was
Sure.
a school of thought in regards to this. It was based upon my discussion. It was told to me that a copper saw and sand and water is able to cut granite stones with the curvature that they have. Is that even possible in your expert opinion?
No, they've attempted to do that, and the progress they made is like they would they're able to cut into the stone like a millimeter per hour or something like that. And the major problem is bronze and copper, they're very soft stone metals, and so granite has a lot of quartz crystal, which is very hard. It's 7 out of 10, with 10 being diamond. And so if you're trying to use sand, which is the same hardness as the stone, both are going to wear out at the same time, and the copper teeth or the bronze teeth are going to wear down really fast. So they have attempted that. It's never worked.
The stone, the way that some of the stones you showed, the curvature of these stones, do you think a saw can do some of these type of cuts? Some of these cuts are very intricate.
Oh yeah, very intricate. There's a location called Abu Sir, which is pretty close to Giza, and there we actually see the saw marks. So we've been able to estimate that the saw was 20 feet in diameter and 3/16 of an inch thick. Something that big would be very floppy. That's a huge saw, and very thin. We don't have anything like that today. We don't have any kind of material, even if you have carbide steel, that is stiff enough to be able to produce a 20-foot diameter saw that's basically that thick. It just wouldn't work.
I've been doing a lot of research for the last 15 years in regards to the ancient Egyptians, because in our culture it's heavily romanticized. Mm-hmm. And I found in my research of earlier books and earlier writings that even the way that the Egyptians went about doing certain tasks, like making shoes, is not advanced to the level of these megalithical stones. So my thing was, when I saw that, I'm going, well, if you have this somehow advanced technology to put these stones in some of these stones, and I'm sure I've seen it on your program, some of these stones are so well fit together and have drill holes in it, correct?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about those drill holes? Because the school of thought with that is they used the same mechanism in copper to drill these holes through these giant, 10, some stones are above 200 tons. Is that correct?
Some are, yeah, but the biggest drill hole we've found is about that big, and that's a massive tube. It's a tube drill, and the thickness is only like that. We don't have something on that scale. Would need a massive drill press, and it would have to be powered by a machine. There's no way that somebody is rotating it by hand. And again, we've taken engineers there to look at them, and they use the term feed rate. That's the speed at which the drill or the saw is penetrating the stone. And from their calculations, the drills used, or the drill bit used, was penetrating the granite 500 times more efficient than a diamond drill.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's amazing. So with that, I know, have you been to any sites? I know, I believe you mentioned Abensoor. Have it been sites? Because I've heard that excavation has happened where they have pulled water from certain sites and pulled up these stones, and no hieroglyphics was on it. Was on these stones.
Oh yeah, no, exactly. The entire interior of the Great Pyramid has no hieroglyphics, and that's the big difference between northern Egypt and southern Egypt. Is in northern Egypt, in general, that's where you find the megalithic, like the monumental megalithic work. And when you get to southern Egypt, almost everything is made out of limestone or sandstone, which are pretty soft, and every square inch has hieroglyphics on it. So if there were hieroglyphics cut in or carved into the stone inside the Great Pyramid, and then all of a sudden they stopped, then you could say, well, the Great Pyramid was under construction. But there isn't one. Like, there isn't one hieroglyphic even that big inside the Great Pyramid. It's just flat, it's all flat surfaces. And the megalithic stuff, that's all you find. You find function. You don't find artwork at all. Any artwork was added afterwards by the dynastic people because the quality of the workmanship is much lower than, and again, that's what's funny about the boxes in the Serapeum. There's one that's basically covered in hieroglyphics, but it's like a child took a hardened nail and scratched the surfaces, whereas the boxes themselves weigh 100 tons apiece and are glossy smooth, like glass.
I watched the work that you were doing and still doing in Petra.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched when you did the sound test.
Yeah.
That was just simply amazing in itself, because the doorway, I realized on some of your programs and even others, these structures have similar doorways.
Yeah, they do. It's the Petra is 7 miles long. Most people think that it's only the famous scene from Indiana Jones, which is the treasury, which is world famous. But it takes all day to walk through Petra, and we find chambers. I think there are 5 of them. Each one's 300,000 cubic feet in size, and they're carved straight into the bedrock. And they do have an incredible harmonic quality.
Wow. Do you find like harmonic qualities like across the board in different sites?
Yeah, we're starting to study the sound more and more. There's a place called Ollantaytambo in the Sacred Valley of Peru, and it has these trapezoid-shaped niches. And if you put your head, there are 13 of them in a row, and if you put your head inside the first one, and you have someone put their head inside number 13, and you hit the right tone, that person can hear the tone going right through the stone, as well as the King's Chamber, too. The King's Chamber, if you hit the right tone, it amplifies the sound like many times.
I've in looking at some of the work that's going on across the world, it's like now it's starting to change the people's minds. I noticed that a couple of years back they found megaliths off underwater in Cuba. Have you heard?
Yeah, I've seen some like really bad photographs of that, so I'm not sure if that's true, but they found cities underwater off the coast of southern coast of India, and they were exposed actually when they had the giant tsunami, because there were fishermen out fishing, and all of a sudden the water level dropped and these buildings rose up and went back down again because of the water going up and down. And so the Indian government has made it illegal for anyone to dive in the area to look at these sites so far.
Why is it so much secrecy, in your opinion, around these different sites? There's so much security and secrecy, so to speak.
Yeah, it is. It's because these things don't fit the basic paradigm that we've been taught. And with the advent of cell phones and internet and things like that, they can't be covered up anymore. Someone could go to any of these locations or other ones with YouTube Live, and there it is. The information is being transmitted instantaneously around the planet. So their ability to cover this stuff up is a losing battle. And the funny thing is that now some of the guides in Egypt are admitting openly to their guests that there was a pre-dynastic civilization because they can't hide the truth anymore.
Wow. And that's, it's a credit to everyone doing great work. I would say that someone that looks at these structures and try to subject that to the dynastic period is being either deceptive or very naive in regards to even we cannot build these things, and cuts cannot be done on an efficient level at that 2.3 million stones and from a civilization that was from that time period. Is to believe that is, to me, is a little naive.
Yeah, it's very naive, and that's why it's all leaking out. The whole Giza Plateau, under the Giza Plateau, is a whole series of tunnels and shafts, and I've been 4 levels under the Giza Plateau, so I've seen it myself, and I was told that there are 10 more levels underneath that. So anyone who's doing serious research in Egypt knows that most of the megalithic work actually was built underground on purpose, and that includes the Valley of the Kings, where you have, of course, the burial places of the pharaohs, but the dynastic people found those shafts and then used them for funeral services, because we were into, can't remember which one it was. One was recently opened last year, and I think it's like 500 feet long or something. We were able to walk all the way to the end, like cut into the bedrock with like polished walls, like 14 to 20 feet wide, 15 feet high. There's no way that's a bunch of, dynastic stonemasons with, chipping away at it. It had to have been done using machinery. There's no other explanation.
At the rate that those stones are polished and everything else, yeah, I mean, that would, logically, someone would say that. I just look at it's so romanticized that people want to believe that the ancient Egyptians, or in that dynastic period, want to believe that they actually did it. But in all actuality, when you look at it, there's no way possible that they had the technology. Because have you found any of their technology moving forward, or has it never moved anywhere?
You mean the tools?
The tools, yes.
No, I think that the tools, if the tools have been found, then they're hiding in warehouses in Egypt because they don't want, those are the smoking guns. There are some artifacts though in the Cairo Museum which don't match the way that they've been labeled. They found, I think in the 19th century, they found 30 to 40,000 hard stone bowls that had to have been turned on lathes. There's no other way that they were done. They have, I think, 25 of them on display, and even the dating, they say archaic period, which means pre-dynastic. So they're even admitting that those lathe-turned stone bowls were made before the invention of the potter's wheel, which doesn't make sense.
Yeah, wow. I mean, because I've seen some reports even in India about certain structures that had these type of laid lines in it, and they were so intricate. And you're talking about technology that's not even readily available to everyone in this period, not alone that period.
No, exactly. There's a great guy called Praveen who has a YouTube channel. He lives in India, and he's been exposing all of this because, as you said, these columns, which are 15 to 20 feet high, made of one piece of stone that had to have been turned on a high-speed lathe. And again, it's cutting into basalt, which is a very hard stone. So I don't think we have lathes of that size today. That would take incredible horsepower to be able to turn a chunk of stone, and there are hundreds of them too.
I know that they mentioned the Olmec heads are built or are out of basalt as well, and those things are carved and turned and moved. It seems to me that the technology, even when we just kind of going back into the Inca period, I know that's one of your where you've been and looked at some things. It appears to be that some of the things that are there magnetically, has some type of, it's something going on even within the stones magnetically.
Yeah, that's true, especially at Pumapunku. Again, I've consulted with geologists about that because there is magnetite which affects a compass. But if it was simply the fact that there was magnetite when the stone was molten and then cooled because it's volcanic, then if you took a compass and moved it around, it would simply change and move in one direction. Like it would alter from the normal background. But these, in some cases, you take the compass at certain spots and the compass will spiral 270 degrees, and sometimes it'll go 1.5 times around. We also took like metal dowsing rods that people use for finding water, and you hold those over top, and they start spinning without, and they just keep spinning.
Wow.
So there are magnetic fields that are set up, and that's probably part of the whole way these things originally functioned too.
Have you found any of that in Egypt?
Not so far, but I'm going to be checking for that when I go in April.
Okay. The last thing I want to say, thank you for your time as well. I don't want to keep you long because I know you're very busy. The last thing we wanted to ask about is the Sphinx. I've heard about the erosion. I know you've seen it up close. What's your take? What's your take on that? Could that be partially the dynastic period, or how is that built in your opinion?
Well, the funny thing about that is the Sphinx is in what's called the Sphinx enclosure. So, and then right in front of the Sphinx is what's called the Sphinx temple. So what we and others have been able to figure out is that the shaping of the Sphinx was done by cutting multi-ton blocks out of the bedrock, and then those blocks were moved, and that's how the Valley Temple was created. So the blocks weigh up to 40 tons apiece. So each one was cut out and moved, cut out and moved to create the basic shape of the Sphinx. And then the head was recarved during dynastic times because it's in very good condition. If you look at any photo of the Sphinx, look at the face and then look at the neck, and you see the amount of weathering on the neck. So it's obvious that one of the pharaohs decided to recarve the face, and Dr. Robert Schoch and 200 other geologists have agreed that the weathering on the Sphinx in terms of vertical weathering was done by water. And the last time there was enough precipitation in Egypt to do that would have been at least 12,000 years ago. And the dynastic people go back 6,000. So it's like with the Great Pyramid. They found the Sphinx, they found the Great Pyramid, they found this other stuff. They decided to name them based on who was around at the time. So Khufu probably decided that the Great Pyramid was his, so he had his name put on it. And then Khafre, his son, had his name put on the second one. And then Menkaure, the grandson, had his name put on the third one. But there are no records or hieroglyphics regarding the construction of the Great Pyramid, which was the greatest achievement in the entire civilization of the Egyptians. And even when you look at their conventional dating, the dynastic people arrive around 3,100 BC. The Great Pyramid is built at 2,500 BC. And after that, all the construction gets smaller and smaller and smaller. It's not like their civilization went that way in terms of technology. It went like this and then dropped off.
Yes.
So the more I go, the more I look, the more obvious it is.
Wow. I mean, that's something that in looking at modern technology, shouldn't technology go forward, not backwards?
It does in our time period. Obviously, it does. I mean, where does this where does this phone thing come from?
Yeah, right.
I'm not that old, but when I was a kid, we still had tubes in TV sets,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden, we have this. That's moving like hyper fast in terms of technology. So yeah, that's what you find again in the whole dynastic time period, or at least a big chunk of it. They didn't have steel tools at all, and for the Inca only had bronze and nothing more. But like their technology never improved really.
Did they have
It
the
was either
will? Did they have the
sorry.
will in the for Incas? The Incas, did they have understood the will?
Yeah, they did. Most archaeologists say they didn't, but even women in the Andes today who spin wool, they have a spool whirl, which is a circular shape that spins around. But the probable reason why the Inca didn't use the wheel is because it's very mountainous territory, and so it made much more sense for them to use llamas to move things around, because a llama can carry 40 pounds. So if you need to move 1,000 pounds, you just string a bunch of llamas together. There was nothing, no animal strong enough to be able to pull a cart. Of course, they didn't have bulls and horses until the Spanish arrived. So they were a very practical people, and they used what was around. They didn't go, oh, here's a new idea. They probably thought about trying to make wheeled carts, but it's not practical in that terrain.
And it appears to be even in other cultures. Like, what would make a culture or a civilization attempt, like Egypt, to build something in that scope? I mean, we talked about the distance of these stones. If they quarried the stones from Aswan and brung them to different places, and you don't have the proper even trees or dragging it on sand, I mean, that's inconceivable.
Yeah, and also, again, going back to Tanis, Tanis is in the north of Egypt, and some of the biggest stones ever cut in the world are located there, and it's all Aswan granite. The distance between Aswan and Tanis is 700 miles.
Oh wow. So some of those stones would have to been taken from there and brung 700 miles. That's inconceivable. Well, I definitely appreciate your time. I actually looked up one of your tours, and we were trying to, possibly get to sign up for one of those as well. I definitely appreciate your time. I don't want to hold up too much. We just want to have a brief discussion about what you saw. And it seems like the overwhelming evidence, I know you're going to be bringing out some more things, but the overwhelming evidence is just leading to that. They did not have the technology to do such things.
No, there's no way. The more you visit, the more you see. And the more you see, the more it reinforces the fact that you had two different cultures. You had the dynastic people, and then you had somebody else before that. The same thing in Peru, you had the Inca and somebody before that. At Pumapunku, you had the Tiwanaku civilization, who also were Bronze Age people, and then somebody before that. And also at Lebanon, you had the Romans, then you had somebody before that. So it's almost everywhere you go where there is megalithic stuff, you see the same thing. And as well, we're going to Egypt in January of 2020 to see this stuff. And it has to be the same thing. You have the ancient Indian culture, and then you have somebody who was there before them.
Wow. Well, I'm definitely going to be watching the History Channel and everything for some of their work and everything else. I appreciate your time once again. Mr. Brien Foerster, doing the work that, brings some things to light in regards to these ancient civilizations. Appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming on.
Okay, my pleasure. Thank you.
I may contact you. I may try to contact you in the future in regards to getting over there to the Egypt.
Oh, of course. Please do.
All right. Thank you very much, and you have a great day.
Okay, you too. Thank you.
Bye-bye. All right, folks. So you folks heard it yourself. We were on live. I don't know how it did, But I will be opening up another live feed for more comments. Okay, for you guys' comments, for more commentary. I'm gonna open up live, Lord's will, maybe, you know, later on tonight. I'll put the time up in my on my Facebook for you folks to be able to chime back in, and I'll give you some more things. This has been very informational to brothers that believe in Kemet. You have to come out of that school of thought. Okay, you have to come out of that. All right, these stones, this is global. I asked them about global architecture. Everywhere you go, from China, I don't care where you go, even in America, Indiana, Montana, there's all these structures that are built, and we know that it comes, the only way you can explain this stuff is by the Bible. There was a world before this world. Shalom, Most High in Christ bless. Y'all stay strong. Shalom.